Hello, my name is Zoe Cavotta. I'm going to talk about the project I have developed. It is a Unit 1 Introduction to Chemistry using Lobster, an online virtual simulation resource. So the goal of the project for my students is that they're going to use the knowledge they acquire throughout this first unit. This will cover things like atoms, isotopes, subatomic particles, the history of the periodic table, the history of the development of the model of an atom, and things like that. Once they have learned this knowledge, then they will begin their final presentation and project using a resource known as Lobster, which is an online virtual simulation resource that I'll talk about a little bit later. They're going to use data and evidence that they collect throughout this activity to propose as a group whether or not they believe life can exist on other planets. So again, what is this for? Where am I using this? I developed it for a high school level Regents chemistry course. It follows the New York State physical chemistry curriculum, and I also try to develop and include as many of the next generation science standards as I can. New York State hasn't fully adapted these to their standards yet, but it is in the uprising, so I try to incorporate them wherever I can. This, like I said, is for if we're following the New York State chemistry standards and curriculum. It is Unit 1, where it's kind of an introduction to chemistry and that foundational knowledge that's going to be really essential for students to develop, to move forward and be successful throughout the year. So following the New York State chemistry standards, this would be 3.1, where students are explaining the properties of materials in terms of the arrangement and properties of atoms that compose them. Again, I like to incorporate next generation science standards wherever I can. So this would be matters and its interactions, where I use the periodic table as a model to predict the relative properties of elements based on the patterns of electrons in their outermost energy levels of atoms. So again, the whole goal of this project is hopefully by the end, students will have a mastery level understanding of those two standards. This unit and project incorporates 5 lessons plus in-class time for students to work within their groups on their final presentation. Here are some of the things that I have mentioned above, images of them. So again, what is an atom? We'll be talking about electrons, protons, neutrons. We'll talk about isotopes. We'll talk about the periodic table and how it's arranged. And here is a link to my website that I've developed over the course of this semester that kind of just outlines the lessons. So the first one, I'm introducing them to chemistry, kind of getting them engaged and excited, thinking about how chemistry is in their own lives that they may have not thought about before or prior to this class. Then we talk about the atom, and I introduce a lot of the vocab that will be used throughout this unit that's going to be really important for them to have a good understanding of moving forward. Lesson 3, we talk about isotopes, and I have them doing a candy lab to kind of give them a real-world example of isotopes using a pack of candy. Then in lesson 4, we talk about the history of the periodic table. This is where I start to actually have them take formal notes, and we do another lab where they're also studying chemical and physical properties of different elements on the periodic table. And then in the 5th lesson is where the kind of project starts to come in and is incorporated into the unit. In the 5th lesson, I have students looking at how to use Lobster, this virtual simulation. I have them first starting out with a very kind of low risk environment where they're just sort of playing around with a lab safety simulation before they actually get into the nitty-gritty of their project and using the Lobster simulation for their data collection for this particular project. Lobster, kind of what is it? It's an online virtual simulation. It's fairly new. They're constantly updating it. What I absolutely love about it, especially as an educator right now going through this whole pandemic situation, is I find a lot of students are, absent and or having issues at home or something of the like. And what I love about the Lobster is that it's already a guided activity. They don't need me there sitting with them, walking them through it. They don't need a separate worksheet to figure it out and go through it and get what they need out of it. They can just click that start button and go right ahead, and it will guide them through the entire thing while also checking their knowledge and understanding throughout by embedding certain quiz questions throughout. And it won't let them move on until they get it right. And as they get things wrong, it will give them feedback to kind of guide them to that correct answer. So it's a great way for me to assign this and kind of have them be sort of independent with completing it. There are some different tools within Lobster, so if something you're interested in, you can look at my website. I have a whole list of the different resources available on Lobster. one being the guide, the AI guide, Dr. One, who brings them through the entire simulation, the lab pad tool that's really important, the media tool that gives them all the nice vocab that they need, their mission tab that tells them when they're done with the simulation, and all of those fun tools that come with using Lobster. How this project is outlined, I have them first learning the content, then, like I said, they're learning how to use Lobster. Then what I would do is have them, I would give them the rubric for how they're going to be graded on this particular project. Then they will actually complete the Lobster activity and collect the data that they need. While they're going through the simulation, they'll be filling out checkpoint forms to kind of guide their learning. Although it guides it for them and asks them questions, because I'm using this to aid in their final project, I want to make sure they're kind of checking their knowledge to outside of just the simulation and collecting data instead of just going through it. Then they'll work with their groups to develop their final presentation. They get sort of an option here how they want to go through that, if they want to use Google Slides, if they want to use Adobe Spark, if they want to use any sort of presentation format. I don't really care. They can use YouTube, they can make a video. I'm kind of leaving that up to them. Then they'll present their final projects, and then I have a nice feedback form for them, because this is kind of also a study for me. I would like to continue to kind of adjust it and make it more engaging for them and more applicable to their real world. But that's sort of the project outline there. The technologies I'm using throughout this particular unit are Kami, Google Slides, Google Sites, YouTube. Those were kind of to present the material and notes. Then the ongoing assessment that I'm doing, I'm using Google Forms and Jamboard. And then finally, obviously, the most important technology resource I'm using is that Lobster resource, where they're using that to collect evidence and data for their final project. The most important thing here, why I'm doing this, why I think this is really important and a project that I'm going to continue to use in my classroom and continue to develop around other units, is because it helps me to, this being in the first unit, helps me to set the groundwork for group work, roles, and expectations moving forward. And then when I tell students to get into a group, they know exactly what the expectations and roles are. It's teaching them how to use virtual simulations in a productive manner and in an educational setting. It's also getting them ready for the 21st century when they leave my classroom. I'm teaching them technology skills, how to actually use these, again, in a productive manner, and how to work around technology difficulties and things like that. And then it also is building great foundational knowledge and skills for them. This being in the first unit is really important. This class is super cumulative. They need this knowledge moving forward, and I think giving them that visual at the atomic level that I can't provide to them in a physical lab setting just only deepens that knowledge and that content knowledge further by using the Lobster virtual simulation or something similar. So I hope you will consider joining me in my project. I'm really excited about this, and I look forward to working with you.